Since its release in 1991, James Cameron's Terminator 2 has been the litmus test by which all action films are judged. It took a relatively simple but well-executed sci-fi action film and turned everything to 11. Movie lovers and general audience members alike hold the film in high regard, but its praises are generally met with a few asterisks.
We're not gonna make it, are we?
You know, there's a lot to say, so let's just dive right in. With the film recently turning 30, I think it's a great time to see if James Cameron's Terminator 2 holds up. First, some context. Around 7 years ago, I saw T2 back-to-back along with Terminator 1, and I enjoyed T2 vastly more, but in my recent look back at Terminator 1, I found myself enjoying it significantly more than I did initially, even going as far as to claim that it's Cameron's least flawed film. Rewatching T2, I think I may have to eat my words, but we'll see. When I watched T2 all those years ago, I remember enjoying the action, but overall feeling as though its pacing was uneven and Edward Furlong as John Connor really stood out to me as negative.
Come on, baby, come on, come on, come on, yes!
Hey, it worked.
All right. Easy money. Come on!
And Jim said, Eddie, I was gonna tell you Friday, but don't tell anybody, but we picked you for this film. And I felt like hugging Jim, but he's a guy, so I didn't hug him.
Watching it this time around, I actually didn't get that at all. I felt as though the pacing was tight as all hell, and Furlong came across as, and I'm gonna be generous here, passable?
You mean people?
Yeah.
I don't know. We just cry. You know, when it hurts.
Rather than terrible?
Lolova Numatafa.
His additions were very rocky. He was completely untrained.
I found it pleasantly surprising, but confusing. My change in opinion between my two viewings of Terminator 1 made sense to me, but this one left me with a weird feeling as I began researching and writing this review. But then it hit me.
3 more hours of this. I don't know how much longer I can take this.
In my initial viewing of Terminator 2, I remember the owner of the Blu-ray had an awesome bust of the T-800 endoskeleton. The edition of that film was the Skynet edition, which includes the special edition, aka the director's cut of the film, which includes about 15 minutes of extended footage.
Do it.
Now, I didn't watch the entire director's cut for this review, I just watched the extended scenes, so I don't want to make any definitive statements, but I'm wondering if that's what hurt my initial viewing experience. There are some in the film community who view James Cameron's extended cuts as generally inferior to the theatrical, and I think this might be the case here for this movie, at least in my opinion. So yeah, with that said, I have virtually nothing negative to say about the pacing of this movie, at least the theatrical cut. I think I mentioned that there was maybe a place or two in Terminator 1 where the pacing faltered a little bit, but T2 is a masterclass of pacing and editing. I think the pacing keeps the movie incredibly engaging, which does a lot to help the movie in terms of it holding up. With every passing moment, I found myself inching towards the edge of my seat, and I think a modern audience will feel similarly. As for the story itself, however, there are some weaknesses. Maybe not weaknesses, but criticisms. For instance, it's kind of a remake of Terminator 1 in a lot of ways.
All right, we got the rights to Terminator 2. Our first choice is for you to direct it. And I said, I don't know. I got other things, I got other ideas. And they said, well, we'll pay you $6 million. I said, okay. That's pretty much how it went.
Broadly, both films are about a Terminator being sent back in time to kill someone named Blank Connor, who face off against someone else sent back in time to protect said Connor. Both films begin with a look into the future that features a transition from future to past using modern machinery. In both films, this immediately leads to the Arnold T-800 reveal, where he beats up and takes the clothes off of some people.
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
In both films, this scene is immediately followed by the second character being sent into the past, Kyle Reese in the first and the T-1000 in the second. Both of these men then have a run-in with the police. In both films, we are then quickly introduced to Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton. We get a scene where a Terminator kills a Connor's parent or parents. We bring back the psychologist character. Sarah parallels Kyle Reese in the asylum stuff, you know, where people think they're crazy for spouting about Terminators. Arnold gets thrown through glass similarly in both films. Semi-trucks hit cars similarly in both films. Around 30 minutes into both movies, we see the T-800 face off against the other person sent back in time in the midst of one of the Connors. Both films have a Terminator repair sequence. We see very similar car break-ins, like these might even be the same model car. Arnold rides a bike in both films and is dressed similarly, what with the leather and the sunglasses. Our heroes also drive a truck to escape the villain in the finale of both films, and we get a scene on a highway overpass where the Terminators change vehicles. In T1, the T-800 enters a gas tanker, and in T2, the T-1000 enters a tanker filled with liquid nitrogen. Terminators are hit with metal poles in both films. Both films' endings take place in some sort of industrial facility, and the Terminators die by the equipment in the facility. And there's also just a lot of imagery that looks very similar. We see skulls getting crushed. There is, of course,
I'll be back. Get out. Come with me if you want to live.
the side of Arnold's face gets blown off in both films.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme.
It honestly feels like for a lot of these choices that Cameron just kind of wanted to fulfill the vision he probably had with T1.
And I got a great story for you, which I didn't.
That movie had a budget of just $6.5 million, where T2 had a budget of $100 million and was the most expensive film ever made at the time. Honestly though, if you're going to mirror the first movie, they handled a lot of it in clever ways.
The biggest, riskiest thing that we wanted to do was to take Arnold from being one of the most famous villains in the world and making him a hero.
Like, I remember thinking the reveal of Arnold being a hero was super cool in my initial viewing.
And the person who objected to it the most was Arnold.
My first thought was, bullshit. Is that gonna work?
And he said, Jim, I don't know about this. He said, I turn into Bambi here. I don't kill anybody, but I'm the Terminator. I said, they'll never see it coming. It's gonna be great.
And the twists do a lot to help you ignore the fact that a lot of this movie is just kind of a beat-for-beat remake of the first film.
Because if you can take somebody on a journey where they wind up 180 degrees out from where they thought they were gonna be, that's like what movies are all about. That's cinema.
All in all, while I consider how derivative this movie is of the first film to be a criticism, I don't think modern viewers will care too much. I like the introduction of Miles Dyson's character as the cybernetics expert at Cyberdyne. I think it's cool how the Terminator from the first film ends up being the inspiration for them to start leading humanity down the path it would take in its eventual downfall. Like with the first film, if you look, I'm sure you can find plot holes by the thousand, but for me, and I think for most modern viewers, they're easily ignorable in this film. While you can argue that the first film operates like a horror/slasher movie, this one eschews most of that DNA and leans significantly more in the action aspect, and I think it works greatly in its favor. In terms of my own personal taste in film, I can't say I'm an action movie junkie, and I don't avoid them, but it usually takes some good buzz or a solid recommendation before I actively seek one out. But when action movies work, they work, and this movie is certainly a crowd pleaser.
Hasta la vista, baby. All right. But I need my foot massages, my oatmeal, my Austrian Christmas music. I need it all. Go ahead, do it.
Each action scene in this film has weight, makes sense in context, and is executed expertly.
James Cameron is one person before the movie starts, and he's another person when the movie begins. Because he locks into a mode, like a machine, and he only sees the movie.
James Cameron is one of film history's greatest action movie craftsmen, and there's perhaps no better example than Terminator 2 in that regard.
It is a really great asset to have this determination and passion, but don't get in his fucking way.
The best compliment that I can give this movie as an action movie, however, is that it isn't dumb. There are solid characters and a solid story, which act as a very solid foundation to keep the action interesting.
Yes. It launches its missiles against the targets in Russia.
Why attack Russia? Aren't they our friends now?
Action needs motivation, and you need to care about the characters for the action to be tense and engaging.
Your foster parents are kind of dicks, huh?
Otherwise, it's just boring. T2 handles this greatly, and I think it works very well as an action movie, and I think a modern audience will get a lot out of its action. It goes without saying that there's a lot of subtext about nuclear war. You know, that's still an ever-present danger, and things like COVID-19 and the anti-science sentiments that have been revealed because of it, as well as the rise of authoritarianism in major countries worldwide, don't bring a lot of hope that humanity will emerge from this technological infancy into an advanced society of empathetic, educated, and scientifically literate people.
This is intense.
And gosh, just look at these robots from Boston Dynamics. Yeah, I mean, this looks cool now, but strap a gun to it, put a half-decent AI in there that's capable of navigating terrain, like what we see in any video game today, and produce a million or so of these and tell them to kill anyone who isn't part of your favorite ethnic group, and, well, yeah, the future depicted in these movies suddenly doesn't seem like much of a stretch.
We're not gonna make it, are we?
This, of course, connects to the film's theme of technological hesitancy.
To me, both the first film and the second film are about the dehumanizing effect of technology and a technical society where people lose their humanity and their empathy.
There's also a subtext of authority.
It is an anti-authoritarianism film. It talks about policemen, parents, psychologists. Do they use their authority for all the right reasons?
Putting the T-1000 in a police officer's uniform is a great way to get us to trust him initially, and the fact that this policeman ends up being a pretty heinous villain is particularly poignant today.
T-1000's default character is going to be a cop because we want an authority figure that is kind of a mixed message to the audience. You know, cops are good, cops are bad.
As for the main characters, I'd say they're handled fine. Linda Hamilton returns as Sarah Connor and is a very different person this time around. I think this works given how much time has passed between the two films, but there is a slight disconnect where they sort of feel like completely different people, with there clearly being a lot of Sarah Connor's life that we just missed in between the two films. Her motivation rests solely on keeping her son alive in order to give humanity a fighting chance in the impending apocalypse. I absolutely loved the scene where she sees Arnold's Terminator for the first time. Like, holy shit, man. All the things she's had to think about, all the things she's worked towards, all the things she had to do to escape, and then boom, he's right fucking there. Just great stuff. I also think it's cool how they sort of twist her into the Terminator in the scene where she attempts to assassinate Miles Dyson. There's a lot of genuine emotion in this movie, and that's part of what makes it work so well.
Killing Dyson might actually prevent the war.
I don't care! Haven't you learned anything yet? Haven't you figured out why you can't kill people?
John Connor's just a kid, and kids in movies generally suck, so it's hard to really give someone of his age any particularly complex motivation. He's really just kind of there to give Sarah Connor something to fight for and to interact and give some humanity to the T-800. I found that the fact that the film tried to give Arnold's Terminator some character to be a little underdeveloped.
Jesus, you were gonna kill that guy!
Of course, I'm a Terminator.
Given the movie's universe, I think this would have been a monumental task to get right, and I don't think it quite works here. I personally don't think James Cameron's the greatest screenwriter ever.
Jim Cameron is just a genius writer.
But even Zack Snyder likely couldn't even turn the Terminator into a real character.
You know, like, Zach, the guy has to urinate?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well,
yeah.
That's not my problem.
I believe they tried to expound upon this in the director's cut, but overall this element of the film doesn't quite work for me and feels somewhat contrived.
Don't kill him.
It, John. Not him. It.
Okay, it. But we need it.
I mean, Arnold is too big of an actor now, so he can't be a completely emotionless brute with no lines or any attempt at personality, and you can't really make him the villain again.
We think that's a really good idea. Is that really the dumbest idea in the world? Is everyone gonna hate us?
So they tried, but all in all, like the first film, T2 is somewhat light on characterization, save Sarah Connor's character a bit. As with Terminator 1, T2 represents a significant leap forward in the world of special effects. While Jurassic Park is the film most people point to in regard to impressive early CGI, T2 has it beat by 2 years. I actually feel as though the CG in T2 holds up better than in Jurassic Park, given how it was used. It was clever to make the T-1000 chrome whenever it was in CG, which helps keep it from looking too dated.
All of a sudden, he makes another step and he is again a police officer.
No cut. It's impossible. You've never seen it.
There's some stuff that simply couldn't be done without CGI, and the film uses the technology in very clever ways.
It's innovative and has nothing to do with the technology at all. It's the ideas are so strong.
Like, how would you have done this scene without CGI? Like, stop motion? Like, you'd cut to a miniature set where you'd get Phil Tippett to animate a piece of, what, cloth as it morphed into a horrible clay model of the guy? No, Jim Cameron would probably have just been told it's impossible and not worth trying. CG gets a lot of flack today, and much of it is deserved, sure, but when used appropriately, it's an invaluable tool to modern cinema, and its use in T2 is appropriate and looks great to this day due to how it was used. There are a lot of little touches that elevate the writing a bit, like the little setups and payoffs throughout. John Connor's hacking skills come into play at the Cyberdyne break-in.
Easy money.
The T-800 uses what he learns from John, like finding the keys at the end here and the iconic Hasta La Vista.
And if you want to shine them on, it's hasta la vista, baby.
So yeah, this movie has a cool story, while operating in many ways as a beat-for-beat remake of the first film, manages to keep the viewer engaged with its excellent pacing and fan-fucking-tastic action sequences. It looks great, sounds great, and is generally very well directed. Oh god, I think my only criticism of this film is that Arnold doesn't say chill out before he blows up the T-1000 here.
Don't tell the DP that, he gets really upset.
This was so funny.
I don't know, I mean, the movie kinda ends abruptly. There is a deleted scene that shows an older Sarah Connor that works sort of better, in my opinion, as a coda to the film, even though it's a pretty weak scene overall. They probably made the right choice cutting it, but yeah, it feels as though the movie just can't wait to reach the credits at the end, as there's not much of an epilogue after the Terminators get destroyed. The use of Bad to the Bone feels like an artifact of the 90s, like it's the only non-diegetic song in the film that isn't just regular score and it stands out as dated, but like, whatever. This far from kills the movie. Taste-wise, I'm not going to claim that this movie is going to work for everybody, that's just the nature of subjective entertainment, but as for whether it stands the test of time relative to modern action movies, I think the film works well in almost every facet. I'm going to say that Terminator 2 does hold up with a 90-10 ratio. As always, let me know in the comments what movie or video game you'd like to see done next, and be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.
And believe it or not, O.J. Simpson was at one point brought up to star as the Terminator.